Hello and welcome to Jigsaw Occupational Therapy. I'm Kelly, one of the occupational therapists at Jigsaw OT. The aim of this short video is to introduce an impact chart and how this will be used during discussion with your OT. Now, the main purpose of an impact chart is to begin the process of understanding reasons for your child's behaviour. This framework is informed by sensory attachment intervention, and as part of this process, your OT will devise an individualised impact chart based on your child and their behaviours. Now, you will have been asked to complete a SAP questionnaire. SAP refers to sensory, arousal state, attachment, and physiological profile, and as you can see, there's an example of a SAP questionnaire on the screen now. Now, this document is key in shaping your child's impact chart, as your answers and comments will be plotted in various sections of the impact chart to begin understanding the function of your child's behaviour. So where possible, we ask that you please answer all questions and give as much additional information in the comments boxes so that your OT can begin to build a picture of your child's behaviours in particular contexts and through specific examples. So I'd now like to talk you through what to expect when discussing the impact chart with your OT. Now, this may be done face-to-face or via an online video call platform such as Zoom, where the screen can be shared and both you and your OT will be able to view the impact chart when discussing it. So on the screen now is an example of the impact chart to give you an idea of how this might look for your child. I'm going to take some time to talk through the various sections and levels so that you can become familiar with this framework. So the impact chart is broken down into 4 levels, which you can see here, running down the screen from level 1 to level 4. And across the screen at the top, we have the 2 core sections, emotional processing, and below the second core section, autonomic nervous system and sensory processing running along the bottom. Now, what we mean by emotional processing is your child's response to sensory information and how they respond on an emotional level and how they are regulating their emotions and sense of self. And what we mean by autonomic nervous system, also referred to as ANS, and sensory processing is how your child is responding to sensory information and how they are physically regulating and what this looks like. For example, what are their survival strategies and how are they using these to aid regulation? But also, how are their behaviours impacting on their movement, their motor skills, their communication, their learning opportunities, their functional skills? So in a little more detail, what I mean by your child's survival strategies refers to our autonomic nervous system, which is our control system. Now, it acts largely unconsciously and regulates bodily functions such as our sleep-wake cycle, our temperature regulation, our digestion, our bowel function, and our monitoring for survival. The autonomic nervous system is divided into the sympathetic nervous system, known as SNS, and the parasympathetic nervous system, known as PNS. Now, the sympathetic nervous system promotes fight or flight responses. It corresponds with arousal and energy generation. It inhibits digestion, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system has been said to promote rest and digest. It promotes calming of the nerves, helps to return to regular function, and enhances digestion. Now, with these systems in mind, we will explore your child's patterns of regulating to the world. So we'll start here at level 1 and begin at the top with emotional processing. Now, as you can see, this section begins to look at your child's attachment history. And what we mean by that is details of their birth parents, of their early life experiences, and their early development. So, as you can see from the example here, perhaps the child was subject to domestic violence, either in the womb or once born, and now the stress from the birth parents continues to trigger an early stress response in your child. If we move down in level 1 to the autonomic nervous system and sensory processing section, this is where we'll explore some common behaviours. So keeping in mind the above example, perhaps your child's stress response is triggered and they suffer from constipation. Maybe they're overly vigilant of their surroundings, and they find it difficult to calm and settle to sleep. So as we move on to level 2 here, we're looking at modulation. And what we mean by modulation is the ability to regulate signals coming from our internal systems and our external environment. Examples of sensory signals from our internal system would be how we receive information that we are hungry, that we need to go to the toilet, and that we're feeling hot or cold. And external sensory signals would refer to our ability to hear noise, see visual stimulation, receive touch. Now, modulation is closely linked to states of arousal. Now, our arousal is influenced by how we perceive the sensory environment and those within it. The question to consider is whether a person's arousal is triggered by sensory environment or by others which affect the modulation process, and perhaps that attachment history. Now, this is where it's really important that we understand possible effects of your child's attachment history and their early life experiences, as this can have an effect on the levels as we move up in this chart. Now, for example, here we are on modulation in level 2. Perhaps your child may rarely feel at ease and is constantly on the lookout. Perhaps they're highly affected by noise and this causes distress. This hypervigilance could have stemmed from their sympathetic nervous system being activated and moving into that survival mode to protect themselves when they witnessed or heard domestic violence in their early life. Now, this could have been loud, and therefore loud unexpected noises could trigger a stress response for the child. Now, we're staying within level 2 and moving down into the autonomic nervous system and sensory processing and what this could look like. So perhaps if the child experienced domestic violence in the womb, they may have physically felt the sensation as well as the emotional stress from the birth mother. This may now present itself as your child avoiding touch, getting angry if someone accidentally bumps into them. This is likely to be particularly evident when touch is not on their terms or it's unexpected. So let's move up into level 3 and look at interpretation. Here we look at how your child is understanding sensory information and how this affects them emotionally and physically. So for example, perhaps your child feels forgotten when you're busy doing something. Perhaps they may not feel contentment when you have separated and you're not obviously engaging in communication with them. Now moving down into level 3, in terms of their perception of this. This may lead to difficulties understanding concepts such as after, first and next. So it may be difficult for them to understand when you say, I'll be with you after I've finished, or we'll do that next. And now let's move on to level 4, the final section, where we look at how our sensory systems and our emotional regulation is organised. So this looks at how the child organises themselves based on the information that they have been receiving. So thinking about the example that we mentioned in the previous section, perhaps your child seeks out help even when they can do things. Now this may be a way of them ensuring that you're keeping them in mind and keeping that engagement. So if they're feeling forgotten, perhaps a strategy to ensure that they're not forgotten is to constantly seek for that engagement. And a way of doing that could be asking for help even when they're quite capable. From your child's perspective, they may be thinking that, well, if you feel that I'm okay and that I'm capable and that I'm managing, you'll leave me alone. Which for them perhaps reinforces their thinking that they've been forgotten, even though this isn't the case. Now we'll move down onto the final level, level 4, and have a look at the sensory processing and autonomic nervous system. Now with these things in mind above and the emotional effects, this could lead to difficulty paying attention for your child, as their motivation is primarily to ensure that engagement continues, so that focus could be hindered. Perhaps this means that they struggle to make friends and maintain friendships in social contexts. So I hope this video has given you a chance to understand and become slightly more familiar with the impact chart and what this will look like. As I explained earlier, this will be individualised to your child when it's discussed with you and your OT. And the main aim is to start discovering the underlying reasons for some of your child's presenting difficulties and perhaps where these behaviours are coming from. Thank you very much for listening.